Hi everybody, Mark from Northeast Bass Fishing. How you doing? I want to do a video here for you guys, and I want to talk about the 5 baits that I go to when I start fishing in the spring, right after ice out. So these are the baits that I'm gonna have tied on, ready to go when spring fishing starts, and I kind of dictate what I'm going to use by the water temps. So let's say you're just started fishing in the spring. It's just after ice out if you're here in the Northeast, and the water's cold. The coldest water you might fish all year. If you're here, sometimes you're happy if it's 40 here in the Northeast, but upper 30s, lower 40s. I'm always going to start with a hair jig. And any hair jig you guys want to use is great. I like the MTO, made to order Bill Alexander hair jig. It's always been my favorite. I have a few others I use. Lead-free Bass Jigs has a nice hair jig that I just bought and started using this year. But I'm always going to go with a hair jig when that water is really cold, like 40, 39, 38. We don't see a lot of those, 30s, but sometimes you get out there right after ice out, you might see that upper 30s in the water. But let's just say 40. When that water is in the 40-degree mark, I'm going to start with that hair jig because I don't really have a lot of baits that I like to go to of my top 5 that really work that well in that cold water. And a hair jig is a real simple bait to throw. 2 things you can do when you're throwing your hair jig. What I do is I'll just tie this on, no trailer of any kind, tie it on, spinning gear setup, 8 to 10 pound fluoro, and I will just throw this out, let it sink to the bottom, and then just slowly just reel it back like I'm throwing a crankbait. Just slowly reel it back to the boat. Now, if the water's really cold and they're not really going for that swimming technique, I will take a little piece of super pork or pork, whatever, and put it on there as a trailer and kind of just hop it along the bottom very slowly. Sometimes just dead stick it. That's if that water's really, really cold and they're not hitting the swimming jig. Now, when I'm swimming that jig, I'm not swimming it fast, just nice, easy retrieve, okay? And I usually go with a 3/16 or a 1/4 ounce hair jig. And I like black is one of my favorite colors. I really throw pretty much 3 colors for a hair jig: black, brown, and green. That's pretty much it. I may throw a black blue occasionally, but those are my 3 main colors. And like I said, pork when it's really cold. Now, if that's not working, and I'm thinking the fish are really pinned to the bottom, that's when I will go with, actually I have it set up here on this one rod. I will go with a blade bait. And that is a Binsky, Fish Sense Lures Binsky, which is my favorite blade bait to throw. I think that's a 1/2 ounce size. Yeah, it's a 1/2 ounce. And that's silver color. But that's when I know those fish are really pinned to the bottom. And they're not really chasing. There's some more Binskys there. They're all stuck together. But the Binskys have a lot of cool colors. You can check the Fish Sense website, and you can see all the different colors they make. They're really great. But those are the 2 baits that I'm looking to throw when it's really cold out. That water's still in the low 40s, upper 30s. And let's see, what do I have this on? I have this just on, I like to keep this. This isn't real heavy line that I use for this. This is probably 12 to 14 pound test. But this is just a 7.3 medium heavy. It's a Vendetta, Abu Garcia Vendetta. Ardent Grand reel, baitcaster. I like to throw it with a baitcaster, and I like to use a lefty. I'm a righty, but it's easier to throw that out, not have to switch hands, and I can just use my right hand to pop that blade bait and reel with my left hand. So when I'm ever throwing jigs, I'm always using a lefty retrieve reel. But the hair jig and the blade bait, if you guys go out and that water's freezing, those are my 2 go-to baits. Now, when the water gets a little warmer, and this is a bait sometimes I'll even start with, hoping they'll bite it, but usually you got to wait till that water gets into the 40s, starts to climb. The fish start to get a little more active, a little more chewing, and then I'm going to throw a jerk bait, a suspending jerk bait. So it just happens to be a Stoneman and Son Lures perch. That's a +1, so it gets a little deeper. Jerk bait, any jerk bait brand you want to use. If you guys like Mega Bass, that's great. I have a ton of Mega Bass. I like to throw them. I throw a bunch of different brands. I throw a lot of Pete's for Stoneman and Son Lures, his custom colors. Actually caught some fish on that the other day. That's just a regular one. That's not a +1. A new bait that I've been using, I just actually got 2 new ones, is the Berkeley Stunner. I might as well just show you these quick. This is that blaze color. I'll show you these quick because I haven't shown them to you yet in any other videos. But this is like a newer bait to the market, or to the jerk bait scene. Of course, these come with stuck in this paper. But these haven't obviously seen the water yet because they're still in the box. But that's really a nice paint job. That's that Berkeley Stunner in that blaze color, that like green back, that orange side. It's pretty cool. Haven't thrown that one yet, and that's a +1. I believe the +1s will dive 6 to 10, yeah. So a +1, that bigger bill will get you a little deeper, which in these jerk baits that they make today, that +1 and +2, sometimes in that cold water early in the season, that's really key to get that jerk bait down a little deeper. But that's just another example. Here's another +1, another Stunner +1. That's that Northern Lights color, which is really nice. I just got that the other day in the mail. I'll show it to you guys quick. Talking about jerk baits here for a sec. There's that Northern Lights color. You guys can see that. Pretty cool. I'm not going to go bother ripping it out of the paper for you. You guys get the idea. Any kind of jerk bait you want to use. If you like to use Megabass, that's great. Megabasses are awesome. If you know someone who makes custom baits like Pete for Stillman Sun Lures, these are great too. You can get any color you want. I throw the Megabass. I like the Provoke 106X, their jerk bait. I still throw a Rogue. A Smithwick Rogue is a great jerk bait. The Spro Mix Stick is a great one. Any one you want to use, whatever you like the best, use it. And I like to throw a jerk bait on a spinning rod. 8-pound test. I don't really use 10 anymore. I've kind of gotten light. As I've gotten older, I'm throwing lighter line with the jerk baits. I'll go 8-pound fluoro, and I don't feel like I'm having any problem, losing fish or breaking line or anything. But 7-foot medium, that's the bait, and that's the least amount I use. And that new FXR rod I got is really nice. I caught some on the other day, jerk baiting with that. So bait so far: hair jig, blade bait, jerk bait. And like I said, any jerk bait brand you like, go for it. Of course, the last 2 baits you probably can guess. And I guess these are kind of in the same, you got to have a jig tied on. And I'm a jig guy, so I always have to have a jig tied on, especially when those fish start getting in, more shallow or they start moving around. And I'll have 2 types. I'll have one, this is an open water sniper jig. From Beast Coast, and I just have a little 2.8 Kitech on there. You can put a Ned on there, whatever kind of trailer you like. I kind of like the swim bait or the Ned, and that's a 1/2 ounce. That's black. I was dragging that around the other day. Didn't get anything on that. I didn't throw it a lot, but I did get some in the afternoon. And this is just a queen. This is a 1/2 ounce queen tackle tungsten jig. I put some rattles on there. You guys can see it doesn't come with rattles. I put some on, and I was using pork, which I always think is important. This just happens to be, I think, a super pork. Uncle Josh makes pork again. There's some other companies I think that are making pork. Pork is I don't want to say making a comeback, but is at least available. These super pork, whenever I show them in a video, that's a company that's been out of business for a while, unfortunately, because I loved them. And I used to always, me and my buddy used to get a case every year of a couple colors and split them up, and we'd be set for the whole year. But when you put pork on there, you always want to have a little worm keeper on there so your pork doesn't flop all the way down. And then just put your pork on. I always use pork in the springtime when that water's cold, always. That's the key to getting bites and not getting bites sometimes. When you get that water that's in the mid-40s, maybe getting to 50. Now, when I was fishing, what day did I go out? Thursday. The water did get into the 50s. And ice out was not that long ago. But that's only because we had real hot weather for a few days, so the water temperature shot up. Now, even though the water temp, the surface temp was in the mid-50s, 53, 54, the water was still very cold. And I think the fish were still very inactive because this jig bite was not going until the afternoon. Once the sun was beating on the water for a while, by 1 o'clock, I got there about 9. From 9 to 12, there was no jig bite at all. After that, they started to move on to like lay downs, some of the shallow cover, and I did catch a few on the jig. And that's just any jig you guys want to use. You know, I live in New Hampshire. It's a no lead state, so I use tungsten up here. That's a tungsten jig from Queen Tackle, 1/2 ounce, and pieces, and I'll put a super pork on there. I do use a plastic trailer in the summer months occasionally, but I like to throw pork. It just has a nice natural look in the water. But there's some good options. I throw, as I've said, I throw that Power Team Lures Crawl or Derv as my trailer when I'm throwing plastic. So really, I guess you could say this is bait. This is really category 4 of, if I'm going to pick 5 baits: a jig, football jig, and a regular flipping jig, which is just an Arky style head, 1/2 ounce, and was this 1/2 or 3? This is a 1/2 ounce. So 1/2 ounce jigs, working them along the bottom, working them on rocks, because I'm usually in the springtime looking for rock, because a lot of times it seems like the bass, when the rock is, you know, in the sun and the sun is hitting those rocks, it warms them up, and that kind of gets the bass to attract to it. So hair jig, blade bait, jerk bait, jig. 4, and last but not least, you gotta have a Ned Bait on. You gotta have a Ned on. It's a great cold water bait. I caught some fish finally. I got a chance to use the Somatis Bait HTW hollow tip worm. I finally got a chance because the water was, the lakes were open. I could use it, and I was using this natural color, and I caught 3 or 4 on it. Crappie, smallies, and you know, whatever Ned head you want to use. 6 to 8 pound test on your spinning rod. You gotta have a Ned on in the spring. It's a great bait for the springtime. You can really, you know, when the fish are finicky and they're kind of holding on to the bottom. You guys know I like to throw the Tech Ned. Notice the similarity with those colors. What colors do you think I like to throw, huh? But you know, the old Tech Bait's Ned's still great. That Peter making now with Stoneman, but that's it. You know, for you guys, you know, if you've never thrown a Ned before, and you're just getting into fishing, get yourself a spinning setup. I like a 7-foot medium rod, at least 7. Sometimes I use a 7.2 or 7.3. Some people like a 6.6. I like a 7 medium at least to start. 6 to 8 pound fluoro spinning setup, and throw your net around and you will catch fish pretty much anywhere you go in the country. But you got to have that Ned in the spring. So that's what I have tied on. And when I fished the other day, the only other thing that I used, and only because it was windy, was I was throwing a spinner bait around, but they would not chase that for anything. So I may have a chatterbait tied on, I may have a spinner bait tied on, but they don't really get used that much. I may throw some crankbaits. I didn't the other day. I was throwing the jerk bait. Later in the day, it started to produce with some smallies and some pickerel. And the jig is always good. You got to have a jig ready to go. And like I said, I prefer pork. If you guys search out there, if you've never used pork before, I suggest you give it a try. It's a little more, you know, it's a little more work than, let's say, soft plastic, because you don't want it to dry out. Put the pork on your bait, and just leave it. If you're not throwing it, just hang it over the side of the boat, let it dangle in the water. That'll keep it from drying out on you. But like I said, for you guys who are, you know, have never used pork before, it is again. Uncle Josh is making it again. It's not cheap, but it's out there. I have a lifetime supply of super pork that I bought years ago, so I'm never going to run out. But that's it. So that's it, guys. That's my 5 baits that I always have tied on in the spring when I go out, right after ice out, right here, late March, early April. And now all the ice is gone. We've had some crazy warm weather, which is actually too warm. I don't like it when the weather gets so warm so fast and the water temps go flying up. It just, to me, it kind of messes the fish up. But on Thursday, they were still kind of finicky early in the morning. The afternoon, you could tell as that sun was out and the water was heating up, they were starting to get more active. And the bite from 9 to 12 was, like I said, very slow. From 12 to 3 was very good. So it's just, you know, you got to play the weather too early in the season. But, you know, throw some Neds, throw a hair jig in that cold water. A blade bait is always a great option. If those fish are pinned to the bottom, of course I can't get these out of there. Nice Binsky That's a 3/4 ounce. A blade bait, when nothing else fails a lot of time, that blade bait is the way to go, because usually that means those fish are just sitting on the bottom and they ain't moving. So you got to just get that blade bait down there to get them to come over and check it out. That may be the way to go, or I'm always looking for that early season jerk baits. That's when I know the fish are really getting ready to go, because that early season jerk bite is just so much fun when they crush a jerk bait when it's suspended out there. But that's it, guys. So get yourself some hair jigs, some regular flipping jigs, a football head jig, some good jerk baits, and a blade bait. And Ned, what else you need? That's all you need for the spring. That's one thing nice about the spring is my boat isn't overloaded with tackle, because I don't really need that many different things. But that's it. Sure, there's other things you can throw, but to me, these are the 5 most productive things you can throw when that water's cold. And this really pertains to you guys here in the Northeast more, I would say, because we get ice, and we have to, live for those 2 or 3 months where we can't really, when the fish can't see anything, when it's pretty dark down there. So they're just starting to wake up now, which the bite is going to be really, really good next week, I'm hoping. Even though it's going to get cooler again, they should, with this warm weather we had for 3 days here, 4 days in a row, all the ice is gone, the water temps have really gone up, and the fish are going to start getting active. So that's it. Like I said, any questions, let me know. I'll put links to some of these, if you guys are interested in Stunnas or some Addis Bates Neds, hair jigs, but really, I don't want, to think I'm trying to sell you a certain brand, because throw whatever brand you want. I have my favorites and things, but, as far as a jerkbait goes, I probably throw like 10 different brands of jerkbait, so whatever you like to throw, but I'll give you a couple links to some things like the Binskis and things, because that to me is probably your best bet for a blade bait. That's in my opinion. Even though I have other kinds in here, I think that's your best bet. But that's it. So, like I said, any questions, you guys, let me know. If you have a bait that you really love in that cold water, let me know. But these are kind of universal of what people throw. And like anything else, you gotta have confidence in it. And I know when it's really tough and it's really cold still, that hair jig's gonna work for me. That blade bait. And when the fish start to get on the cover, I gotta have a jig ready to go. And who doesn't love the early season jerkbait season? It's just great. It's just great. And sometimes if they're hanging on the bottom, that football head jig is really good, just dragging that along the rocks. But that's it. So I'll put a few links on there for you guys for some of the baits here, if you guys want to check them out. But if you look at some of my other videos, I think you've probably seen all these videos or these baits in the past. But like I said, any questions, let me know. And if you got that, bait you love in that cold water, let me know what it is. Maybe I'll try it out. Okay? So I'll see you guys soon on YouTube. Mark out.